First, as you are aware, Israel confirmed today the death of the leader of the Hamas terrorist group, Yahya Sinwar. We'd refer you to the Israelis to discuss the details, but this is clearly a significant development and a major counterterrorism achievement. As you saw from our readout earlier today, Secretary Austin spoke earlier today with Israeli Minister of Defense Gallant to discuss the reports on the killing of Sinwar and to get an update. I would highlight that when the call occurred, the IDF was still working to confirm Sinwar's death. During the call, Secretary Austin also reaffirmed U.S. support for Israel's right to defend itself and reiterated that the deployment of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Battery represents the United States' unwavering, enduring, and ironclad commitment to Israel's security. The Secretary also expressed strong support for the immediate release of all remaining hostages and a ceasefire in Gaza. We'll have much more to say from the Department on the death of Sinwar very soon, and we'll keep you updated. Separately, as we announced last evening, U.S. military forces, including U.S. Air Force B-2 bombers, conducted precision strikes against 5 hardened underground weapons storage locations in Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. U.S. forces targeted several of the Houthis' underground facilities, housing various weapons components of the types the Houthis have used to target civilian and military vessels throughout the region. U.S. Central Command is still conducting a post-strike assessment, so I don't have any details to provide on that front, other than to say that we struck exactly what we intended to hit. We'll provide updates as appropriate. As Secretary Austin highlighted in his statement last night, the employment of the B-2 bomber was a unique demonstration of the United States' ability to target facilities that our adversaries seek to keep out of reach, no matter how deeply buried underground, hardened, or fortified. And it demonstrates U.S. global strike capabilities to take action against these targets when necessary, anytime, anywhere. It also sends a clear message to the Houthis that there will continue to be consequences for their illegal and reckless attacks, which put innocent civilian lives and U.S. and partner forces' lives at risk. Shifting gears, Secretary Austin arrived yesterday in Brussels and today participated in a de-ISIS ministerial, the first session of the NATO Defense Ministerial, and a productive meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council. In his opening remarks at the de-ISIS Ministerial, Secretary Austin highlighted the work over the last decade of the global coalition to defeat ISIS. And I quote, "For 10 years, this coalition has tackled the scourge of ISIS. Our success stems from our resolve, our commitment to working together, and our willingness to adapt. These core elements will remain at the heart of the next phase of our mission," end quote. Tomorrow, Secretary Austin will participate in the second session of the NATO Defense Ministerial and engage with his NATO counterparts to discuss strengthening the collective security of the alliance and international support to Ukraine's defense. We'll continue to provide readouts and updates on the Secretary's engagements throughout his travels. And finally, the Department of Defense continues to be fully engaged with FEMA and the whole of government relief efforts related to Hurricanes Helene and Milton, and will continue to work with our federal, state, and local partners to ensure we're supporting and coordinating response efforts in support of our fellow Americans. As of earlier today, the National Guard had more than 4,200 guardsmen, nearly 600 high water vehicles, helicopters, and more than a dozen watercraft from 7 states mobilized for the response and recovery mission following Hurricane Milton. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has approximately 450 people supporting with temporary roof support, infrastructure assessment, debris control, flood response, and more. Meanwhile, the department's support for the U.S. government's combined response for Hurricane Helene continues as well. The National Guard has roughly 2,500 guardsmen, 65 high water vehicles, and 11 helicopters from 13 states mobilized. Approximately 1,400 active duty soldiers are mobilized as well, working with federal, state, and local partners on coordinated response efforts. Active duty forces have been engaged in road clearing, commodity distribution, and access to isolated personnel. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has more than 500 personnel engaged in 33 missions across the region, supporting debris control, temporary power, infrastructure assessment, flood control, and safe waterways assessments. Secretary Austin continues to receive updates on these response efforts, and the department continues to be engaged with interagency partners in support of FEMA, the White House, state, and local governments. The Secretary and his team are also focused on DoD personnel and their families who may be impacted by the hurricanes.